Welcome to Oblong Books. Thank you so much for coming on this rainy Thursday evening. We're excited to have Barbara Probst here tonight with us, and her new book, Roll the Sun Across the Sky. Barbara just told me that this is her first event that she's doing with Oblong Books, and we're so excited to have her. And just some housekeeping for tonight. You're going to be able to purchase this book and others after the show.
We're going to be singing and dancing.
She'll also sign them for you. And I just wanted to point your attention towards the events that we have upcoming that are all available on our website. We have Lily Taylor at Morton Memorial Library next Thursday with her new book, Turning to Birds. And the Thursday after that, that would be June 5th, we have Shelley Reed with her new book, I believe, at Oblong Books. This is all available on our website. You can sign up there.
Shelley, as in go as a river, her?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I'm pretty honored to be on the same calendar.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
You know?
That's amazing. We're so excited to have you here, Barbara Lynn Probst and Louise Wall. We're going to be in conversation, and you're going to also have the chance to ask questions after,
Heckle during.
Don't heckle. Thank you so much for being here. Please give a very warm welcome to our panelists tonight.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Well, we're just gonna talk. We were talking on Zoom to talk about what we were going to talk about. We had to tear ourselves away after an hour. So
we did.
Yeah.
And Barbara said, just stop because we need to have some fresh content for.
Well, yeah. And I said, don't tell me what you're going to ask.
Right. And she was great about that.
Yeah. I don't want to know. I have to. It's otherwise it becomes too studied. You know.
I agree. And she said, ask anything. So.
Well, more or less.
More or less.
Just not my age.
So the first question really is, what would you like everyone here to know about the book before we start talking about it? How would you like to set up what people should know? I don't know if you want to talk about the dual timeline, where we start.
I'm just going to say something. This is an interesting character in the book because she's complicated and she's not always likable. And I was very intrigued by that because none of us are always likable. And can we be more than our worst acts? Can we still redeem ourselves even though the bells can't be unrung? We can't change, we can't change what happened. We can't make it not, we have to live with it. And how can we go forward, nonetheless, being this flawed, complicated people that we really are? So that, to me, continues to interest me about the character. And when I read people's responses, to the book, that's what really fascinates me because it's us. And now, the other thing I want to say is now more than ever, when I wrote the first draft 2 years ago, I didn't realize that I would be launching in the world that we are in now. And I think we really need this capacity for compassion and opening up to say, I don't know everything about you. There may be things, maybe we can still connect even though I think you're X or Y. That somehow that openness is really needed now. So that's kind of, I'm gonna stop talking.
Well, what would you like people to know about where we are, what year is it when we open the book?
Well, it's very intimate. It's a dual timeline, as Therese mentioned. So the early timeline is 1977, when she's taking a ride on one of the last trips of the once glamorous Orient Express from Venice to Istanbul, which I indeed went on. But of course, I was 4 years old at the time. I barely remember it, but joke. So that's the one timeline, and she's 24 years old. And then the second timeline, which opens in the second chapter, they interweave, is in 2013, and it also has to do with the train. There was a train crash on Metro North, which is the train that we take into the city, on 2013, when the driver, the engineer, went into a kind of a fog with undiagnosed sleep apnea and drove the train off the rails, and a number of people were killed. And that incident had fascinated me, because here's this character who does a lot of things that have consequences, but this seminal incident that changes her life is not something she did. It's random. So we have both things that influence our path. So those two kind of interwoven train rides are the setup for the dual timelines.
Okay, that's good.
Do you like that, huh?
I do, no, that's good. And I
Yeah.
had been thinking about that as
Yeah.
well, the fact that she controls so much about her life.
But not everything.
But you can't control some things. And
Yeah.
so, right, how impactful that was for her. So, ready? There's something exhilarating about following a character who breaks the traditional female protagonist mold.
Yes. Mhm.
And Arden is one of the most complex characters that I've read in a long time. She's smart, strategic, and at times genuinely shocking. Whether her choices are impulsive or chillingly calculated, they're undeniably hers. How important was it to you that Arden's choices feel intentional, even when they're morally questionable?
Well, that's a multi-part, complicated Therese Walsh sort of question. But I thought about this a lot, because in the earlier chapters, when she's quite young, it's impulse. And we're like that. We don't really think that what we do is going to be that crucial for anybody else, because we're the center of the universe. We think that our impact on other people is huge. That's one of the illusions that she has impacted Robert's life more than it turns out she really did. But then later on, in sort of, as she gets a little bit older, her choices are actually similar, in that in each case she's faced with a situation, there is no good choice. Both paths are going to hurt somebody. Both paths have unfortunate consequences, and she's stuck in a situation. In one of them, she's literally driving the car at 60 miles an hour, coming to a crossroads, and she has to do something. What to do? There is no good choice. So because she does something, then she has to live with it. So I didn't see her in those cases as choosing to be bad. She just felt, as our dear beloved Donald would say, a situation, a plight, because there are two bad choices in front of her. And then later she's able to make some very compassionate, kind choices by restraint, where no one else sees. And so that's the most mature choice in a way. You're not getting credit for it. You're just doing what you need to do for the good of someone else. So there's different kinds of choices throughout her different stages of maturity.
Mm-hmm. No, I
Did I
agree.
answer your question? No. I answered my own question.
I think that you answered the
Okay.
question.
Okay.
How conscious are you as a writer about creating protagonists who don't blend into the archetypes that we so often see?
You know, this character just came to me. So she just was herself. It was not something I plotted out, you know. But later I got interested in the fact that she's not your typical female protagonist. And that makes some people uncomfortable.
She's very strong.
Mm-hmm.
She knows what she wants. She's very active in her world.
Mm-hmm.
She has agency, and she fights for it at times.
Well, that's another thing that interests me, is that there's a lot of books with female protagonists where the character becomes empowered. That's her arc. she's maybe more timid, more anxious in the beginning, and comes into a kind of agency in the course of the book. This is almost the opposite. Has lots of agency, and what she has to learn is the thing she doesn't have, which is restraint, which is a quieter gesture. So that, I would say I discovered that in the writing. I didn't set out to do that, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting question that you discovered it in the writing, and it makes me, I have to ask, are you a plotter or a pantser? I know you hate that word, everyone hates it, but you know what it means.
I know. Well, here's what I do. I do have a vision. I kind of, sort of know where I'm headed. I have a picture of, usually like at the climactic scene, but I have no clue how I'm going to get there. So that path to get there is discovery, and it is listening, and it is letting myself be receptive. You guys who are writers, in the shower, in that early morning liminal space when you're not quite asleep and not quite awake.
It's a good walk.
It comes to you, and you begin to see how the path, it's like a photographic image coming into color and dimensionality, so that's kind of what my process, and I don't know what the word for it is.
I think discovery writer.
Yeah. There was a blog about that.
There was,
yeah.
and I think it was Denzi Webb who wrote that
that's right.
piece.
That's
and
right.
It was excellent.
Yeah.
But I think discovery writer, and it's a nice way to say it.
Because
it's nicer than pantser.
Well, pantsing implies that you're just all kind of like whatever, and it's not. I mean, I have a vision of something, and so that's like a guiding light. But you just don't know what. You also don't know what you're going to encounter on the road. What are the animals, the obstacles, the surprises, the detours? That all is. You're at the service of the story. I felt the way, but every one of my books, it's like my role is a midwife. Like to serve the emerging.
Yeah, I think that's nice, and there is that sense that when you're writing in service of the story and service of the characters, that you give yourself that you have the ability to listen to what the characters are telling you. They're pulling you in certain ways, because I don't find it's very easy to know a character until they're sort of coming live on the page for you.
And then you have to go back and fill in. The other thing that was sort of interesting for me in this is that, it's very much Arden, but her daughter, Lee, needed her own chapters. She needed a voice, a place to give voice. And I had no clue that was going to happen until like the third draft.
That's interesting.
So there are those things that just, and so you have to leave space for that, for not knowing everything. And as you said, you get to know your character, and you just have to listen. And sometimes let something go that's not working.
Yeah. No, I agree. So let's stay with Arden for a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
So she might be divisive with readers, and yet there's a strange magnetism, I think, about her, a desire to keep turning the page to see what she does next. And I'm curious how limits shaped her trajectory for you. Did she ever surprise you? Was there ever a line that you, as the author, wouldn't cross for her, or conversely, a line that she wouldn't cross, even if it made sense for the story?
There were times when I needed her to do something really strong and a little shocking, and I took risks. I took a risk many points in the story. I'm not going to ruin it, but and I had to go a little further than I would have. Right?
You felt out of your comfort zone?
I felt, yes, I had to go there. And my first mentor actually taught me that with Queen of the Owls, certain scenes. She said, make her go further. Go there. Go to the place you don't want to go. And I think that's where writing a book changes you as a human being. You know, you're creating it, but it's also creating you.
I agree. What do you think intrigues us about characters we might not be friends with in real life?
Yeah. It, you know, I think we have the difficulty with ambivalence. We like certainty. We like this person is this way, this one is that way. And, you know, we've talked about that a lot, about needing certainty, needing, in a way, putting things in boxes because it's simpler. It's simpler. And, well, I forget what I was going with this, about characters that we love and hate at the same time. They fascinate us. That's one of the reasons we have to keep finding out, what is she going to do now? And what is going to happen? Oh my God, she really did that? Now what? You know, and it's not creating dramatic events that are kind of contrived, that the events come out of the character. Mm-hmm. And that's why you want to keep reading, because you don't know what she's going to do. She seems very impulsive and kind of like shockingly selfish, but she yearns to be good. This has been a thread throughout the book. Deep inside, she does want to be good, and how is that going to finally find her?
Yeah, and I have a note here. It felt to me, you know, when her keening to be good, you know, she says this, and the first time she thinks it, it's like a prayer almost. Mm-hmm. But this keening to be good felt to me like her way of holding a door open for her best self, you know, to step through despite her worst acts. So do you think that the simple desire to be good, if it's persistent enough, can actually influence how someone behaves over time?
I would say yes, because that is, you know, I think that one of the questions that I have her ask herself is, which acts define your life? Can you be better than your worst acts? And we all have things in our lives that haunt us, you know? And it's not to let yourself off the hook, but you have to let that be and yet try to be better without denying what you did. You know, it's a mature, that's part of her journey, is into becoming more mature in that way, mm-hmm. to include and hold this complexity of our humanity.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that comes full circle when she's 60?
I do, exactly, because, I mean, 60 is kind of a turning point, and so prior to that, I don't think she was capable of having that depth of self-reflection. And of course, the shock of having this train accident, it's not a spoiler because you know this in chapter 2. Her husband and daughter are amongst the random victims of this train crash. And so that sends her into a state of deep questioning.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to ask about that. So grief in your novel isn't a tidy or redemptive process. It's entangled with guilt and sometimes manipulation. What drew you to exploring this kind of complicated grief? And what can fiction do with it that therapy and real life can't?
Well, those are several questions.
This is what I do. Just pick one off the tree.
And I just start riffing, and I may not even answer what you asked.
That's
but
okay.
I mean, grief is very powerful, and it's one of the core feelings we experience as human beings. The minute you attach, the minute you care, you're going to set yourself up to potentially grieve, letting go, having something taken from you, you know. So it's very profound and it's complicated. And in the book, when she brings her granddaughter for therapy, the girl is 10 and has lost her mother, and it turns out that there's a lot more going on. And in complicated grief, because I was trained as a therapist, you lose the person before you have a chance to resolve the stuff between you. So it's all still hanging there, the anger, the rage, the guilt, the betrayal, whatever happened between you. It's too late, you can't fix it. And you're left with this a sort of double grief of the loss of the actual person, but the loss of the potential for healing. And particularly for a child who doesn't have the maturity, to think it through, it has many layers. So, and I think, and Arden, of course, herself has the complicated grief about her daughter as she begins to discover that maybe her daughter, her thing is that all the choices she made, she's like, I did it for Lee. I did it for her to have a better life. I was a good mother, so even though, there's some downside, I did it for my daughter. And then maybe, what if she turned out to be not a very nice person? That throws her whole life into question. And who was her daughter? And was she a good mother? And what does it mean to be a good mother? These are strong. So when the person isn't there to help you answer them, you have to find your own way.
Mm-hmm. There's a moment when something cracks open in Arden and her aperture widens. They're in this period of time that we're talking about here. In that moment, she sees beyond her self-interest and certainty, recognizing difficult connections between herself and her daughter that she can't unsee. Do you think that kind of forced shift in perspective is one of the few things that can challenge deeply rooted self-interest? Is that a potential answer to how we can grow beyond ourselves?
I think you've answered the, yes. But, I mean, in literature, you set those moments up to be more well-defined than they necessarily are in life. But there has to be a moment when your character faces the core question of their existence, whatever that is. It might be the need for courage. It might be, different things. In her case, it's the need to really let the others in and accept her own. It's what literature's about. It's to help us as readers to give us models and strength to do that ourselves.
I have a question. I'm going to have to loop back a little bit to something, but I do want to say something off book here, off-road, going off-road, God help us. So, and that is, I love how her character is explored in the beginning of the story when we're in the 70s, and she's on this gigantic trip, and she is going from country to country. How, as a 20-something-year-old, she's discovering herself as well. I often think of character as aligned, a character on a journey as aligned with an actual physical journey, but it's also an emotional journey. We talked about this a little yesterday. But the sense that she is knocking into different cultures and different people and having thoughts, but it's also very revealing of herself. And I had to wonder how Arden at 60 would experience that same trip.
You mean if she were to do it again?
If she were to do it again and bump into those cultures and those people.
Well, she's going to. She's going to take her granddaughter.
And how it would be for her, right?
She's at a whole different stage, yeah. I mean, it's true, without getting into too much of the weeds of this scene, a whole bunch of this story takes place in Egypt, in the early part of it. And she does come up against cultural differences and doesn't like them. And has,
and there's so much during her travels. She seems fascinated by Artemis, the goddess of contradictions. So I thought that was important. Did that resonate for you in terms of how you see Arden?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because that was one of the details I added in draft number 20, And I didn't realize until we were talking, it's almost the same name. Oh my God, who knew? Yeah, something about that Artemis being the goddess of both chastity and fertility, of the hunt and caretaking. I mean, what is that? And that is Arden. The contradictions. wow, I love how our subconscious is smarter than our consciousness.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. So, and I have to say more about this rich sense of place that you have brought to the story. It is really well done. I enjoyed it so much. Just the intersection between character and place, and I got to know her so well. I think through the way you delivered that to the page. So. Loved it. And there's so much beautiful, vivid description there as well. So from the very beginning, we meet Arden as a traveler. And during her travels, okay, so do we feel that different places, especially abroad, awaken parts of Arden that might have stayed dormant if she'd never left Brooklyn?
Well, actually, I think that applies more to places in New York because she lives in a kind of crappy little railroad apartment down in sort of Tribeca, before it was called Tribeca. She lives in a very swanky Riverside Drive palatial apartment. She lives with an Italian working class family in Brooklyn, and she has this whole relationship up here in Rhinebeck with the apple farm guy, So each of those New Yorkie places represents a different part of her life, and back and forth too,
Right. And do you think then the way that you've used place and setting in this way to bring her to a new place, and a new place emotionally and psychologically in the story, do you think that novels specifically are built to do this, to invite us to think about
place
and space within ourselves as well, to explore ourselves in ways that we might not be able to access at home, if that makes sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, every story takes place somewhere.
Right.
And you have to know where you are, and the influences, in the details of the little railroad flat that she lives in with Jonah, I could just see this place. I don't know, I must have lived there, but I could just see the details of the cracked tile in the bathroom. And it's in those, you don't have to say anything, you just have to show those evocative details that change how you are. We're different in different spaces.
Well, it's interesting too that she does focus on things like that, though, like the cracked tiles.
Yeah.
Like she's unhappy about something, and what she focuses in on are these unhappy little details, right?
Well, that's what you're doing as a
Right.
writer, because
Yeah.
you don't have to, I hate this thing of, this is one of my of thinking our readers are stupid, that we have to tell them what everything means and what every single thought that, you just give space for the reader. Actually, this is something smart that Don said.
Don't tell Donald.
Which was that, it really stuck with me, because we don't want to read about a character having an experience. We want to have an experience, which means, George Saunders is who I quote here, you have to leave space for the intelligence of your reader. So you pick a few telling details or gestures or something, that then you can then arc back to them later. You don't, if you want to layer it, and you just need to evoke that one detail, and the reader knows exactly what you're referring to earlier in the book.
You do a beautiful job with that as well. There's a strong thread in the book about starting over, about pushing forward, even if your past is heavy, and the scarab beetle becomes a quiet but persistent symbol of rebirth throughout the book.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah.
If you'd like to talk about that a little generally, but I have a couple questions. So, and I'm just going to give you, I guess there are just two here. So, have we become more cynical about redemption? And what kind of an opening does a character like Arden provide for us in this era when it seems that tolerance is at an all-time low?
Yeah, when we talked about that, and I alluded to that. Yeah. It's a very interesting question, because unless we believe that people can still be good, what are we doing? And it can be hard to see the goodness in some people who don't act the way we would define good. But isn't that really where our deepest humanity lies? So I think that we can't afford to be cynical right now.
what do you think story can show us about tolerance and
Yeah.
forgiveness and
Yeah.
holding a door open to different versions of ourselves or other people with wildly different perspectives?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's around. One of the interesting moments, and I'm just going to kind of go, where she, I don't want to ruin the book for anybody, but she decides she wants to confess the worst thing she did to the person that she did it to, in a way hoping for that through confession there will be a kind of atonement, forgiveness. That's selfish. She's like, no, I can't lay that on him. I just have to eat it. I just have to stay with it and forgive myself or not. And I forget where I'm going with this. There was somewhere I was headed with that. But that in a way we have to forgive ourselves. If we're gonna, we can't ask anyone else to forgive us if we don't also do that hard work, which means really looking at ourselves.
I agree, and I think this era too is so complex.
Yeah.
And I think if books can help us to, sorry, I just all of a sudden need a tissue. If books
Don't
can
cry.
help us to, I know, don't cry, I won't
Yeah.
cry. To see that. Sorry.
I mean, if you read about a vulnerable character and you care and you're rooting for this person, it's all set up, it's kind of easy. What is it if you read about a character that maybe is not so easy to root for initially? What does that call upon us as readers and as human beings? I think it's more interesting. I mean, I took some risks in this book, you know. I mean, some people who loved my earlier books were not happy with this book. Say, Levy, you know, you got to try stuff.
How do you feel about the character?
Oh, you know, I would say I get her. I think, now I've not done some of these things, but some of them I maybe have, but not all of them. But in a way, her impatience, her recklessness, her remorse, her longing for answers, all of these are in me, but when you take what's in you and you write it large in the character, so I don't feel identified with her, but yet I get her. And I'm grateful that she let me write her story.
Do you feel that that this experience with her is going to push you in different directions as an author moving forward?
You never know. You just don't know. You know, I mean, every time I finish a book, there's this emptiness, you know, this terrible mourning. You don't know, you're unmoored, you know, adrift. So I have no idea. But I'm very interested, actually, in the question of goodness, as though maybe it sounds corny. But it's the only question, as I get older, what kind of a human being am I? And what kind of a human being might I still be? And can I live for the good? Those are the questions I care about at this stage of life.
That's beautiful, and I think that it's so imbued in the story.
I mean, there are people that hate her, and I think they close off to her too soon. Or maybe she makes them uncomfortable because nobody likes to look at their own imperfections, you know, who knows. But I read a review this morning, actually, of a book blogger, and I just loved it because she said, I started out hating Arden, and I ended up loving her. And I said, thank you. That's exactly what I wanted, you know?
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
My work here is done.
What was that, David?
I said, my work here is done.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like, I love that. It's complex. You know, like, you can't keep writing the same book over and over again.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I knew, you know, that some people were shutting down to Arden, based on our conversation. We talked about it, and I had seen some of that, but I do wonder how this era of quick shutting doors
Ooh, yeah.
affects us as readers,
Ooh,
and
that's good. Yes.
and it affects us as authors as well.
Yeah.
You know, are we too careful? We want to make sure that our characters are full of soft spots, and
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
it's like, but not everyone is. What do you do with a character with pointy edges and someone who isn't comfortable, you know, in your moment? You know, it's like she is a woman in the 70s traveling abroad, and she takes no. She is tough. She's, you know, I can understand how at that time she would have been an aberration in some ways, but she stands for something.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny. In the first chapter, when she's in the train and she's in the restroom,
Yeah,
that I added. I needed
that's
something.
a stunning scene.
I needed something to really show. It's like, excuse my language, it's like, fuck you. You know, I really needed, and I needed to show
and
that.
I think we can explain what the scene is.
Yeah,
Explain
so-
that little tiny moment.
Because it really was.
It was stunning, but it just shows you who she is,
Yeah.
how much steel she has.
Yeah. Well, she's on this Orient Express, which I went on. And it was no longer, it wasn't the Orient Express of the Agatha Christie, you know, it's pretty seedy. And she's with this guy and some other people that they meet in this car, and it's a 3-day trip, which is true, from Venice to Istanbul. And, you know, at a certain point, like, no one's cleaning the bathroom, and there's no, you know, it's just really, and filled with workers, mostly local, which again was true. And so, so she has to use the restroom, and the door doesn't quite shut, and she tries to tell this Italian guy that, just, can you guard this? But, you know, he doesn't speak English. And she goes in, and she sees him watching her through the gap. And she's like, you want to watch? I'll give you something to watch. I was like, whoa, I never would have done that. But I needed something without telling the reader, oh, well, Arden is, just show in a way that the average person would not have done it, you know? And so that, when you get to know your character, those moments, those details come to you.
Yeah, it's interesting how that came with the third draft or
Yeah,
so.
something like that. I needed something.
Mhm.
It wasn't, I needed, you know, some little
Yeah.
short 1 page,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But yeah, that, you need to get to know your character very deeply to see what she would do.
And I felt that she was really resentful of a lot of the gender.
Well, and that was really, yes, because I went to Egypt later on, a few years later, and I remember that, man, they wouldn't talk to me. They only talked to the guy I was with. Like, I didn't exist. So this whole kind of fierceness about empowerment as a woman,
And you can feel
we're there
that.
again.
You can feel
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's just that strong,
Yeah.
independent-minded 20-something woman who
Yeah.
wants to take no prisoners is up against one wall after another. And you know, in the same way that someone isn't their best self when they're ill or something like
Yeah.
that, someone's also not their best self when they feel that they're imprisoned by walls, not of their own, you know, their own doing, but societal or
But
cultural.
it's also youth too, because there's a point
For sure.
When she's reflecting about when she goes back to New York in the early chapters, and she's maybe 24, 25, and she's talking about things that happened in the city, and she says, "But the only story that interests me is my own."
Right. She's hungry
And
to
we're-
discover.
And we're like that when we're young.
Yeah.
But as we get older, we don't create. Space appears where we're not the center of the story. And that's and through that we can actually care about others.
Yeah. This was the next card, was that exact quote, so I'm just like racing ahead to see if I have a good question for you. They say, do you think the 20-something era is a particularly common era for being a little bit selfish, a little self-centered? But isn't that also linked to self-discovery?
Yeah, you can't help it. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're young, that's what you're doing.
That's
Yeah,
what you're doing.
trying to find out, and you are the most interesting person in your life, is you. And I think becoming a parent also helps to open that. But and you don't have to be a parent. You just have to be open and porous to others, to life, which comes through maturity.
And I think part of also what you're doing in your 20s is you're learning your boundaries. Like, or it's almost like there's that thing that we used to do when we were kids, where you would put a leaf under a piece of paper and then take the long end of a crayon and do this, and you would find that leaf. I feel like that's a lot of what we do when we're young people, and we're trying to figure out who we are, what our own boundaries are. And again, to put that over a trip in which this character can't get to enough countries. She is so hungry for more and more and more, which I think shows you that you have a character with a lot of territory. This is a character who has a lot to discover about herself, a lot of life to live.
Yeah. I also, for me, that little bit in Italy, when she meets the kid, this.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Also another crazy moment. We won't tell you about that one.
But she actually wants to help him in a way that may be a little bit
off book.
But she's like, I'm going to do this one good deed. Make him feel good.
A very unconventional approach.
Yeah, like I said, there's stuff in there. I didn't do any of those things.
Now I'm going to be like, she said not all of them. I'm going to be like, which ones did Barbara do?
When I used to talk about Queen of the Owls, where she posed nude, I would say, I did not pose nude yet. But anyway.
But I also want to say something about the regrets that we rack up when we're in our 20s. I think that a lot of people do, and how those things, as novelists, we talk about the greatest pain, things like that, right? But these, and it doesn't even have to be the greatest, but there are things that are out there that have affected us, that have bruised us in some way. And we behave differently because we've had those life experiences. If they are a greatest pain, then there might be a void there that we're continually trying to find a way to fill, right? So it's tough to feel regret, I guess, over some of these things that could be called regrets, right?
Well, one of the themes is she keeps saying, I need to pay.
For what she's done.
What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
You can't fix it. You hurt somebody, you betrayed somebody. You can't go back and fix it. What does it mean innerly to pay in yourself, invisibly to the world? It's a very big question about payment, because remorse is a feeling, but is there an action that accompanies it?
And it's interesting because I think for a lot of people, the answer is to dissociate yourself away from whatever it is that's happened. You don't want to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't, and life does what it does, and on you go. But then a train crash comes, and you don't control that anymore,
right.
And all of a sudden you are in a moment where you sort of have to confront the thing that you didn't really realize you needed to confront, maybe, or certainly didn't have the time to confront because life was going and going. Right. But the train has crashed.
But there's another.
It is off the rails.
You're making me think of another theme in the book, which is that no one is just one thing. And I'll give the example of her granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Her granddaughter has this vision of the train crash, like she feels it when it's happening, and we don't know as we're reading if she's kind of like
psychic or
wacko,
something. Mm-hmm.
or making up stuff to get attention, or has some psychic sensibility. We don't know. And guess what? We don't need to know. because no one is just one thing. No one is good or bad, you know, and this sense of being able to hold the contradictions, the not knowing, very important.
I also think it's interesting, this is maybe a little too down the authorial sort of rabbit hole, but, you know, she makes choices throughout the story.
Arden, yeah.
It's like, it's one or two, one. It's one or two, two. It's one or two.
You have to, yeah.
But at the end, she's more, it's one of three. You pick. You know, it's like an acceptance of a wider world, and an ease. She sort of eases into this sense of not being able to control everything.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
She accepts.
I'll do my best.
She accepts that she's not always going to have agency.
Yeah.
Can novels help us to recontextualize our own collection of regrets, do you think? Can they help us to rewrite our own narratives?
Well, of course, there's many different kinds of novels, written for different purposes, read through different lenses, you know. But the kind that you and I like are for the reader. They're not just, they really want your book to touch people in important ways. And it's okay if you're reading a book just to escape, just for fun. I mean, I read The Wedding People. I totally loved it. It was completely delightful, and it was what I wanted to read that particular week, and it got nothing against it. But the books that stay with me are the ones that disturb something in me, make me open, kind of like get their little claws in me, you know? And sometimes, not to mix metaphors, it takes a while for the seeds to germinate from the claws, no? But you know, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yes.
So let me
Yes.
let me move to Arden is a poet. So let's talk about Arden as a wordsmith. So she's a poet with a talent for spinning meaning with words. So late in the novel, there's a powerful moment where a hurtful phrase is reinterpreted and transformed.
Yes.
What role do you think reinterpretation of words in particular plays in forgiveness or even survival?
Yeah, exactly. One big theme in the book is fiction versus nonfiction narratives, the story that we make up, the story we tell about what happened. You know, it even started with her fictitious fantasy of the train ride versus the real train. You know, this, and so what is the truth? What did somebody really mean by what they said? We'll never know. If you choose an empowering, healing narrative, that can help. It's not to just make it pretty, but when you really don't know, you cannot know. Lee's gone, she can't be asked what she meant. So why not, she helps her granddaughter to find a healing interpretation. Why not? Why not? Can't words be used for the good?
Yeah.
You know?
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful moment. And I just had written, isn't storytelling also a kind of reinterpretation?
Exactly.
A way of selecting which moments matter?
Yeah, how we tell the story about who we are, what we stand for, what we were in this life. And and by redemption, another way of thinking about it is second chance, is making a new story about yourself. When I used to be a therapist, I did narrative therapy, which was to help people find a more empowering story about themselves.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
We should interview her about that at Writer Unboxed.
Actually, new blog. Wait a minute, note to self. June blog piece.
I think that would be super interesting.
Don't you write about it, it's mine. I got that one. Well, sometimes I'll read, I'll go like, no, damn it, I was going to write about that.
I know. It's so funny because this is a very brief aside, but I run a writing blog, and there is a contributor who one time said, I was thinking about doing this next time I contribute in a couple months. What do you think? And I was like, no, it wasn't you. It was Keith Cronin.
Oh.
And I'm like, no, it's a great idea. And then next thing I know, what am I writing about for my next piece? And I'm just like, oh, Keith. I'm so sorry. Anyway, it happens.
Yeah.
He
But
still
anyway.
doesn't forgive you.
I know, he probably doesn't. He
Yeah.
probably doesn't.
He's got a great sense of humor.
He does.
Fine.
What do you hope that people are left wrestling with when they close the book?
Well, with their own question, how do I want to live my life now? I mean, that is the question, right? Life is hard. We have, what do I want to do with Mary Oliver, The One Wild and Precious Life? You know, it sounds like a cliche, but if a story opens that for you, not just for your character, and she's not done. I mean, it ends with very open-ended kind of new possibility thing, you know. I mean, it's such a privilege to be able to write. Really, like it's just like the best thing to do. So maybe eating chocolate. but yeah, you know, and I think for me also, I really yearn to be understood. I don't want to just be liked, you know. So if people have grappled and wrestled with the book and come away with a new thought, then that's really feels very good, you know?
Yeah, I hope that people remain open to Arden. You know,
Yeah.
she is complex and she's really fascinating. And I enjoyed the book very much. And I think you're a beautiful wordsmith. Some beautiful writing in the novel. It was a pleasure.
So I knew we would just have fun talking to each other, if nothing else.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about? I'm off book now, so now we can just like bring out the whiskey.
Well, I think I would like
Laugh
to just
track.
make a quick little thing about the title, which is sort of fun. You mentioned the scarab. So in ancient Egypt, I discovered the scarab beetle. Well, the actual beetle, what it does is it rolls its eggs in a ball of dung across the ground, pushes this, and until the new life is ready to emerge. It's basically from shit. And so in ancient Egypt, this scarab became a sacred symbol for the dawn, that after the darkness, you know, then the god Khepri would literally roll the sun so that each day you have a new chance. So for me, this metaphor that out of the most vile things one has done, the things that seem worthless, unbeautiful, ugly, you know, valueless, shameful, smelly, out of that could come this new life and this transformation. And so when I thought of, actually a friend of mine came up with the title, and I said, well, I was going to call it A Great Big Ball of Beetle Dung, but yours is better. So yeah, to me, that it's the message that don't be so quick to disavow about, you know, the deeds you regret, because that feeling of self-questioning and yearning can come out of that. That is really the seed of your transformation.
Well, and it's literally fertilizer.
Yeah,
you know, it's
there you go.
It's fertilizer for what comes next. And
So I was thinking of handing out little packets of beetle dung, but
chocolate is so
no,
nicer.
it really is. But I mean, anyway, it just interests me because, you know, isn't that our hope?
Yeah, I mean, there's only right now,
Yeah.
and so what will you do with it?
Right.
And so if you are continuing to tell yourself, if you're messaging to yourself, you know, for Arden, it's be good. Don't be that. You done that. It didn't work out. You regret it. Don't do that again. Every day. Then that's how you live the good life.
Yeah.
Right?
So, anyway, we better stop talking.
Is there anyone who has a question for Barbara?
Since we've covered just about everything.
I
curious about this, that she wants to be a good person. And we normally think of that as a good person will do good things. But what she discovers, it seems, what I'm hearing, is that for her to be a good person is to sort of surrender agency and to instead accept restraint. Am I getting that right?
Well, it's a core moment when she, that's in one particular scene.
Okay.
You have to read the whole book. But
I'm on it.
but I was interested in the fact that normally this climactic moment is when the character, you know, rescues the child from the burning, goes back in at one's own peril to pull the dog out of the fire. You know, there's something that finds a capacity for some big act that they didn't think was possible. That's a typical moment of rising up. And for her, I was interested in that one moment being at the opposite of holding back, because that's the thing she's never been able to do. She's learned to say and do whatever she feels like. So for her, the opposite was needed. That's not going to be, she's not going to be just like going forward, but that was the moment where something shifts for her. We don't know what her life is going to be like after that. I guess, there's always an open end. Does that make sense?
It does. It kind of reminds me of Cheryl Sturrid's memoir, where for her, the climactic moment is a moment of acceptance.
Yes.
And when you mentioned, what you can't forgive you can't forgive others unless you forgive yourself. I cringe at that because I only, in my life, there was someone who said, not to me, but to someone I loved, well, I don't know why you can't forgive me. I've forgiven myself. And it's like,
that's too easy, right?
And also I taught in prison, where you talk about people having to be realizing that they're more than just the worst thing they ever did. And in particular, my guys, a lot of them were murderers.
Well, that's very powerful. Yeah, I mean, you can't, it's not by making it okay.
No.
You have to eat the shame.
That's it. Yeah, and it was, a lot of these guys have been in prison for 20 years, and it took sort of like that path of stopping, blaming others, stop, fighting what happened to you, and just beginning to accept, yeah, it was me. I did it.
Right. I mean, I think we all have moments like that in our lives. I mean, I can share.
Or who did you kill?
With you. No, but I mean, my children are adopted, and with my first child, I did something that ended up hurting his birth mother because I was panicked. I was scared. I hurt her. And I have regretted it. My son is now 35. I regret it to this day. I will never be able to make it right. But I let that regret help me. But not by fixing it, but by letting it be one of my gurus, Mm-hmm. So to me, it's kind of like we all have things like that let it live here, and so that feeling helps me to do right in another situation.
Regret as guru is a really interesting idea. It's powerful.
Yeah, because you can't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. And so I think these kind of complicated characters are worth writing about. They're us. If you get a little uncomfortable, I say, what is it, what evoking in you, And not you, but I mean, for any reader.
No, I know you meant me.
Yeah.
I also think in this era where we're, I think a lot of us are feeling like we live in an uncentered time, right? And so let's talk about the characters who are maybe not centered, who are edgier. What does that mean, and who are they? And isn't that enlightening? When we maybe get to the bottom of what makes them tick. I think that's humanity,
Yeah, I mean, it's what's worth writing about. But, yeah, you know, it's, any other hard questions? Or can you do, she did 3-part questions. Anyone do a 4-part question?
Oh, well, mine were like 5-part questions, and then Sean was like, you should really tone that down.
What did she
Do I
say?
have to?
No, and I said to her yesterday, you know, like don't tell me what you're going to ask me, because then, you know, you know, just you think on your feet, and then because then stuff comes out that you didn't even know that you knew, you know.
Yeah.
Which is really the fun part about this, you know. One more.
Sean Walsh, have your hands up.
Yeah, Jacosa has a question.
Well, anyway, it's been a pleasure just getting to hang out with this lady.
It's been fun.
No, it's like, I haven't seen you in like 5 years.
I know.
It's like super, you know. Oh, I told her like she was my first choice. I didn't have a second choice. I was determined. So, really special to have this conversation.
It was.
I really appreciate it. Because we're talking about the stuff we care about, you know? It isn't just like a promo. It's not like, you know, it's to really, why books matter, you know? So, all right, so we're good. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are we good or what?
So.